Continuing education knows that at the end of the day, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we really listen to their needs, and we can offer them flexible options both within continuing education and across the campus.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Hello. Thank you for joining us at the 78th Annual Conference on World Affairs. My name is Alphonse Keesley, and I will be the moderator for this particular panel along with our panelists. I've had a couple of people come up to ask if one of our panelists who was listed will be with us, Tom Mayer, and unfortunately, Tom will not be able to join us today. If he walks in, we will all be joyful about it, so that would be the way that we're going to go. For this recording, today's date is Tuesday, April 14th, 2026, and this panel, which is starting at 12:30 p.m., and the title of it is CU Boulder's 150th, Generations of CWA, How One's Professor Big Idea Became a Boulder Tradition. And that's a really important word. And in fact, the gentleman who was a part of, well, there's somebody, would you mind working with this? Sorry about that. It sounds like there was some miscommunication going on here. We will proceed, and I will try to get a hold of Tom myself when I'm able to, as soon as I can. So just to make sure that for the recording that you have the information, that Tuesday, April 14th, 2026, 12:30 p.m., and the title that I've told you about just now. Before we get started, I would like to read the University of Colorado Boulder's land acknowledgement. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of indigenous people in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute people, and many other Native American nations. The forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty, and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support, and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Thank you. Once again, thank you for being here for CWA, if you will. Now, the way that the event will go today, as it has gone for years in the past, we will ask that all attendees remain respectful throughout the discussion and refrain from interruptions, signs, barriers, and noisemakers, and other audible disruptions are not permitted and will result in those people being removed from the session. Time will be allotted for questions from our in-person audience. We will take your questions via handwritten note cards. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and a producer, they're standing near the back there right now, will give you a note card and a pencil. Please write legibly Then raise your hand when you have a completed card, and a producer will collect it and bring it to me. And now, I would like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And I will remind our audience that the full speakers' bios can be found online at the CWA website. And we'll begin with our first panelist, which is really important, is Dr. Oakley Thorne, the second.
Here we go. Thanks, Alphonse. Can you hear me? Okay. Excuse me, I'm a little hoarse here. I'm Oak Thorne, and I am the founder of Thorne Ecological Institute, which is now, we changed the name to Thorne Nature Experience, and we do environmental education with kids, connect kids to nature. They need to get out into nature as soon as possible. In fact, David Sobel says that he wrote a book called Wild Play. It's important for kids to just be able to wild play in nature. So that's kind of my work, is working with kids and getting them out away from their computers and iPhones and into nature.
Okay. Charlotte, if you want to go ahead, introduce yourself and share whatever you wish.
Awesome. My name is Charlotte. I'm 23. I recently graduated from CU in December 2024 with a Bachelor in Political Science. Since then, I have interned with Senator Bennett, and at the university, I partook in several organizations, the Center for Leadership. I began my own called Students Against Unjust Imprisonment, and most importantly, the Conference on World Affairs. So at the conference, I held numerous positions. I started as a chair for the Human Condition Subcommittee. Later on, I was a representative at the Center for Leadership for CWA. And finally, I was the student chief of staff last year. So, yeah, that's my experience at CWA.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about the three of us who are sitting up here is that we've been involved with actually putting together CWA at different periods. The whole idea of this panel came from the gentleman who's sitting right here on row 1, 2, 3, 4. And we met just after Christmas to talk about how we might want to do this particular panel for the 150th. I think something is happening still there. Okay, good. For the 150th anniversary of the University of Colorado. And one of the things that I really enjoyed working with this man, this is John Leslie, the Vice Chancellor for Strategic Relations and Communication, was that he has brought so many interesting ideas to the university. And during our discussion right after Christmas, we were talking about how we might talk about this particular conference over the generations, not just the years, but the generations. And so on this particular, we're going to call it a round table rather than a panel because we're missing one of our important people for this panel. We're going to do it as this. So the idea was to actually try to pay attention to the way things changed over time. This was great. This notion of tradition is something that John tried to bring to the entire campus several years ago. I'm a former associate vice chancellor from the campus, and so it was a part of the work that we would do together at many times. And so this was something that came to mind. I've never forgotten John for this aspect of what he was trying to do. Being from the South, and John, I can't remember if you're also somewhat Southern related. Maryland. But still, there's some influence from the South there. We are people who actually pay attention to traditions. And so this is a tradition that we would like to acknowledge today, that this particular conference is one of the most enduring traditions that we've had at CU Boulder, the University of Colorado Boulder. In fact, if you were to look up traditions on our website, it might be a little difficult to find out. Many things related to traditions are usually related to the football practice, if you will. But this is one that has a very unique mix. And this is where I'd like to start. I'm going to ask Oak to start. That's what he usually calls himself by, to start, because he had some familiarity with Howard Higman, who's an important piece. And if we know, and you will learn from this wonderful book that I purchased and didn't know that we were going to be actually handing out, really, folks, this is really a very good book. We also have in Norland Library, in our rare and distinctive products, the transcript. And I loved listening to the very first one when this book was being distributed to the people who were running CWA at that time. This is from 1998, and this book really contains a lot of that which is, you can hear from the sessions that you can get over in Norland Library. It's, I think, very interesting to listen to it. So if you have an interest in knowing more about what we're going to be talking about, definitely go to our rare and distinctive parts of the Norland Library. So we'll start off with Oak, because Oak has had some familiarity with some of those early days.
Yeah, the first, I came out here to get my PhD. I had been at Yale for 7 years for a bachelor's and master's. And so the first year I was here, 1954-55, was my first panel in 1955. That was a long time ago. Buckminster Fuller came at that time, Eleanor Roosevelt. Dr. Walter Orr Roberts, who founded NCAR, was one of the founders of Conference on World Affairs. So Howard felt it was important to particularly to have a diverse panel, so you got different points of view. And sometimes you were put on a panel that you knew nothing about, and he kind of liked that. Anyway, that was a great experience to meet him and actually be being in the audience in the early days.
Okay, Charlotte?
Yeah, my experience is a little more recent with CWA. I came in right after COVID happened, so these were some of our first panels that we did that were in person after that. So I really got to participate in rebuilding the conference and restructuring how it looked from being online and figuring out how to get it back in person. And I've absolutely loved seeing how the different committees have changed and the different topics that students want to focus on. I think we've seen a ton of growth in topics like not political science, politics and media grow. So yeah, it's been very interesting to see the development of CWA across these past 4 or 5 years.
So, again, I'm going to run this mostly as a kind of conversation amongst us all. What's interesting to me, given that the three of us have been behind the scenes in helping to put together the way the conference will go, Oak, back in 1955, in the day when you were involved with it, did it involve many students, as like with Charlotte, as we have today?
Boy, I have no idea, because I was a student myself.
Ah, okay. So you were coming from the perspective of a student and your involvement.
I just attended.
Okay, yeah. I can tell you from what I've read and heard on the pieces, really it was mostly with the faculty who were involved. In fact, one of the interesting things that you will find out from either listening to that which is recorded over in the rare and distinctive books area is that one of the members who helped Howard in coming up with this idea was the historian for the Manhattan Project. I just read that this morning. David Hawkins had been the person who was a part of helping Howard in shaping this notion. Then there was another faculty member from the physics department who was a part of it. This is the period of 1947-48 when we're looking at right after WW2. And when you listen to the session with the folk who were there in the early days with Howard, you will find out a lot of these people were paying attention to what Robert Oppenheimer had done in creating the bomb. If you haven't seen the movie Oppenheimer, I strongly recommend that you do. But to know that CU has this direct connection, or had that direct connection, with the Manhattan Project is rather amazing. And then there were several other faculty members who were a part of the early days with Howard, who were working on putting it together, who were important. Hawkins continued at the university. Well, he passed away in 2002, but he retired in 1983, and some of the other people. I really encourage you to take time with this particular gift that the conference has for you today. And also, if you want to enliven it a bit, to make sure that you check out the recordings of the sessions. We have recordings of the sessions from the 1980s forward. So like we're doing today, recording this particular session, you will be able to hear people who were actually involved. Charlotte, what did you know about CWA before you decided to join with doing it?
Well, my professor actually introduced it to me. John Griffin. He ran the conference for some time. Yeah. So before I knew nothing coming into my first meeting. And then when I arrived, they were like, "What committee do you want to join?" And I was like, "I don't know what this is or like what we're doing." At that meeting, that was when I found out what CWA was. And then I got really excited getting to see some of the recordings from the Zoom, and learning about all the speakers and the panels that they create, and learning that it was very student focused. That's interesting to hear that. I had no idea that it was very faculty focused when it first began. But yeah, I first found out through Professor John Griffin and just immediately was engaged in wanting to create the conference.
Yeah, my first involvement was when James Palmer, who's the person who followed Howard after Howard had passed, then we had James Palmer, who took over running CWA, and then following him was Professor Griffin. This is that, and now the person who's helping to make this a reality is John Leslie, along with everybody. So that's the kind of long history, if you will. So I'm going to shift to the part about our involvement in actually helping to put CWA together. Oak, you have been working with the Science Committee over years, right? If you wouldn't mind talking a bit about the Science Committee.
Right, science and tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, we start out usually in August or early September and start and figure out who we want to invite to come. So it's quite a long process, and then we have to contact the people that we'd like to come and find out whether they're interested in coming or not, and then they have to be approved by the overall chairs committee, and then they get invited. So it's quite a process putting the panel together. I just wanted to mention something else after you mentioned David Hawkins, who was the historian on the Manhattan Project, and then he became a professor of philosophy here. I had the honor of working with David and Franny, his wife. They loved, they had a center, elementary science center here, and they particularly worked with children to get children connected with science. And I had the honor, I was making a lot of educational films back then. I had the honor of making several films with Franny and David Hawkins on different topics like balances and sorting and different concepts like that. They were great.
Good, thanks. Charlotte, which committee were you a part of and involvement that you had with putting the conference together?
Yeah, so I was part of the Human Condition Committee, and I actually started as a chair of the committee, which was a little intimidating, having never actually been to the conference. I think when I first sat down, I didn't understand how a week event could take a year to create, but then once you see the inner workings, you realize how much actually goes into it, how long it takes to get speakers and find what's most important to all the students. Later on, as the student chief of staff, I really got to connect with the faculty and community members, and I think that was one of my favorite parts after learning about the formation of the conference itself. Getting to connect with everybody who's a part of it was just amazing.
So we need to tell the audience a little bit more about how we make what used to be referred to as making the sausage, how these panels are put together. The panels were real. There was one particular day in January when all of the committees would come together, and then we would find who would be on certain panels related to international affairs, as I'm working on international affairs this year, or who would be doing things with any of the other committees that these two wonderful people were a part of. And that would be a full-length day of trying to find who would fit on a panel that was related primarily about science or related to about any of the other topics that we had as a part of it. We have 6 different committees that we try to involve with this particular conference, if you will. So my involvement this year is with international affairs. Previously, last year, it was with the arts, and I've enjoyed that very much. So did any of you actually moderate panels over the years? Nope. Okay, that was one of my little duties. In fact, I got introduced to CWA by James Palmer calling me to ask what panels would I be willing to moderate a particular panel. He had already chosen it. And so he asked if I would do it. And this goes back to around 1996 when that was involved. And ever since then, I've been involved with either chairing or being behind the scenes with either the advisory board or with the steering committee, as I am now. And so we put together this particular conference using a lot of our different talents and people from the community. According to the recordings of this book's orientation or birth, you will find out that, in fact, there were students involved beginning in the 90s, which I found really fascinating, as well as community members. Community members were beginning to be a part of the conference during the 90s and became much more involved. So technically, as a faculty member when I was here, I was able to moderate. I couldn't be a part of a panel. But then after I retired, as I am now, sort of, then I could actually be involved with certain of the panels that we're doing right now and so forth. So right now, I'm going to shift a little bit. We talked about this earlier. What were some of your favorite panels? And this is a question I'm going to be interested in hearing from the rest of the audience from your attendance over the years, assuming. So we'll just start with us in talking about the panels that we really enjoyed being a part of. Okay.
Actually, the panels I enjoyed the most were the music panels because I play jazz piano, and so I really enjoyed the panels that Dave and Don Grusin put on, and some of the other musicians. And I loved the jazz concert. I'm very upset that that's been canceled. We got to bring it back. That was such an important part of the conference.
Any other panels over the years? Charlotte?
Yeah, one of the panels that I first created my first year of CWA was a panel on solitary confinement, and I thought it was so impactful. We had an individual who his father was in solitary confinement, and he came and spoke at Mackey with his attorney, and it was a very moving, probably one of the most moving panels I've seen at CWA. A little later in the years, I love Ty Tashiro. I don't know if any of you guys have been to his panels, but he's had a couple comedy panels that have been some of my favorites after that. So.
Okay, good. Given that I had an opportunity to moderate a number of the panels, the last one that I did last year was related to applied history. I don't know if many of you are familiar with the concept of applied history, but that's something that we had as a panel with a completely full audience. And it was an interesting gathering of 4 individuals, and I absolutely loved it. I really didn't have to do much as a moderator except to pay attention to the timing of what was going on, because a lot of those panelists were very good. The other one that really impressed me was when, I think, yes, it was Jim Palmer, asked me if I would moderate a panel on exoplanets. My field is speech, language, and hearing sciences. My involvement with the campus is in theater. Exoplanets I had never heard of, but I learned a great deal that time for that particular panel. Another one of the panels that I really enjoyed being a part of and moderating was a theater session that we had over in room 235 that was really, really, I thought, exciting. This is one of the points that Oakwood just made about there are a number of people who were on that panel who didn't have a clue about anything related to theater. But it turned out to be an exciting point for the conference, because it had to do with people who have no knowledge of how theater works asking interesting questions. And that was the idea that Howard had in the very beginning, of having interesting conversations about various topics. And so it wasn't that you had to always have experts on the panel. It could be where you have a lot of interested and talented people coming together to have interesting conversations about things. Did you all think that that kind of an arrangement still worked for today, of having people who were experts in one way but others who were not experts on the same topic?
I think that's a very important part of the conference, that very thing. And that's something Howard really liked.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite parts, was seeing we have all the speakers submit their interests and different things that they can talk about, and getting to pick out something that a speaker just put as, like, in my free time I play guitar, and then getting to put them on a music panel. It's so fun to watch them, and I feel like they bring in insights that experts might not even think of.
Yes, that was something that we think is really, really important about the way in which CWA is put together. Sticking to the original idea that Howard Higman had, it was about people having interesting conversations. Even though those early people back in 1947 and 48 were not necessarily individuals who were interested in every topic, they found a way to bring people together. In fact, one of the gentlemen who was a part of those conversations that you'll hear on the recording was about when Arthur Miller, the playwright Arthur Miller, came to CWA, and the scientist said the best keynote speaker that was ever here was Arthur Miller, a playwright. And so the mix is a really important ingredient for the way CWA works, and that Howard Higman was always interested in when he first got started with this and going from there. I think this is really an important piece that we want to do. We're going to mix it up a little bit more and going on and asking just about what we think the future and the importance of CWA. But before doing that, I want to share with my panelists, I don't think you all attended the session where Congressman Neguse was present. We had a few disruptors. Well, there's one person in the audience who was there. We had a few disruptors. I think it was about four of them. Thank you, John. And that moment during the session while not exactly what we were interested in CWA of people being disruptors, but we do want people who have different positions and perspectives about things, who are willing to have conversations in a civil discourse manner. A really, really important feature of how we invite certain people who are part of the various panels for CWA. Those moments yesterday in that session on whether or not higher education is important to democracy was something that a colleague of mine who's on the committee as well recognized. While we didn't appreciate the fact that it interrupted the time that was devoted to what the panel was about, we did appreciate the fact that people were speaking up. And the panelists had in fact been talking about that, the need for people to begin to speak up. But the main point for us, this colleague and I, was that it's about how we can bring different perspectives together in one space on a panel for civil engagement with each other and so forth. What do you think, how do you think that's worked, y'all, in terms of having people who may have very different perspectives on things and being a part of our different panels?
Well, I don't know quite how to answer that, but it's certainly the key important part of a panel is to have the different points of view, and particularly it's great when the couple of the panelists have totally different ideas about and argue it out in a interesting way through their conversation.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think this was something we really started to focus on in my later years at CWA. And I feel some of the things that we thought would turn into a debate or a controversy between the speakers actually turned into them finding common ground, which I think was really important for a lot of the panels we created and for the audience to see those common points.
Okay, we're beginning to get lots of questions that we can sort of answer as a panel. I'm sorry, before we get to that, the future. What do we think of the future for CWA and its importance? Which is the reason I even brought up the panel from yesterday where there was disruption. What do you think about what CWA's future might look like and how we should either work to keep it or not keep it?
Keep it.
And
yeah,
why?
it's such a great format, and it's very special. If you check with other colleges and universities, it's probably one of the most unique programs nationally. The whole way it's structured.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like CWA. Everywhere else I've gone, there's no other conference or event that compares to what CWA offers. I think I've only seen development since I've been a part of it. And something that I've been really excited about is a little bit ago we got a audience suggestion to bring back some of the more tangible parts of CWA, like books and fashion shows. And so I don't know if you guys saw last year, we had a fashion show for one of the panels. So getting some of those more tangible panels and letting the audience really engage and be a part of that is a lot of fun. So I look forward to CWA's future. I think it's only continuing to grow.
Yeah, I'm on board with both of you in terms of, again, knowing how we put these panels and the whole conference together. I think that it really does have a place. And again, I'm very committed to what we learned from that session yesterday with Congressman Nagoose and the kind of interaction that took place, that we need to recognize that there are going to be topics that we really do need to find ways in order to have interactions with people from different perspectives, and how to do it in a civil manner. While it can be really a tough conversation. It wasn't like we want to just sort of be nicey nice about it, but we really need to think about certain kinds of pieces of information that are important for the world that we're continuing to increase, that Charlotte's going to be a part of more than Oak and I. It's really, really something that I think that we have to do it, and why the university needs to continue to invest in this whole notion. So, I could get preachy about this, but I won't, and I'll see if there's anything else. Anything else that you all want to just throw out, not a part of our planned way in which to talk about this whole idea of Howard Higman, and an idea that he started back in 1948, and how it's continuing to today, and that we are now asserting that it probably should continue, if you will. Go for it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would like to talk about is that it's so fun to be an audience member and to watch, but I thought one of the more fruitful things was actually planning the conference, and you all actually have the opportunity to do that, all of you watching too. I highly suggest it. I think it's so fun to see the inner workings of this and get the things that the Boulder community is passionate about and have the opportunity to bring those to campus. So if you have the time, I highly suggest volunteering and becoming a part of the planning process.
The question is basically whatever you want to talk about right now related to this whole theme of what the conference is about, this particular panel is about.
I think of some of the people that were involved early on, like Buckminster Fuller and Walter Orr Roberts. I mean, they were the kind of people that really grabbed ideas from everywhere and came up with the concept of this wonderful interaction that we get among the panelists.
Okay, so now I'm going to shift to some of your questions, and we'll go from there. The first question that the great producers have put together that I will be presenting to you, for you all to respond to, is one of my most vivid memories as a kid was attending Roger Ebert's Interruptus film screenings. Do we know how that got started? Either of you?
I think Roger just came up with the idea. It was his.
I think people just want to stop a film and say, what was that? You know, that it happens all the time. People don't get it. Some of them think, helps them to understand it.
Yeah, the question though was, do you know how it got started with Roger in particular? Roger was associated with Howard for 28 years, he's gone on record as saying. So he was with Howard for a number of years. How that relationship came about is not necessarily anything that I've read about or heard from any of the recordings that I've seen from the library system. But that's something that I think I will research for the next time we have such a conversation. But they got together, and Roger became a true supporter of what this conference was about. But why they decided to put this as a part of the conference, I don't have a clue. In fact, that's what all of this, there's something that you will read in some of the things about Howard, is that this is one of the things that was important about Howard Higman, is that he was interested in people having interesting conversations with people. Although, Roger talks about, you'll read in this particular work, Howard didn't want to be on any panels. He didn't want to be on any panels. But Ebert was very interested in him being on panels, but he dismissed it by saying that Howard was too busy trying to keep everything going. He had all the balls up in the air and trying to keep the conference moving as it did. I'll get to you in a bit. I want to take the questions that we have here. Thank you. What's interesting about that response is the director of the conference that followed, Jim Palmer, was from film studies. He was a film studies professor. Yep, yep, yep. Good friend of mine. Stan was not necessarily a person who was directing CWA. He was doing more experimental things. Y'all, I know a lot about the campus because of being an administrator. So I know a lot about almost every department around campus, if you will. And even back in the day, in the 70s. I've been here since 74.
Yeah, in fact, when I was just starting to make films, I took Stan Brackage's course. And the main thing it taught me is I can do anything.
Speaking of Dr. Thorne, here's another question from the audience. Thank you, Dr. Thorne. My daughter went to Thorne Nature Experience and benefited. How do we get our children off their computers playing games and cell phones? So, Oak, you have to solve the problem of contemporary media.
Well, get them outside. That's the most important thing. That's what we do at Thorne. Just if you get kids into the field and find interesting things, whether you're looking for birds or turtles or frogs or whatever, the nature itself, it just has so much to offer. And if you get kids out there and they discover that, then they get hooked.
I have a question here that I'm not sure I understand all of it. I'll try to get back to it if I can decipher it later. Tell us about the jazz concert, how it came about, how and what it was like in its prime.
Oh, the jazz concert came about because Betty Weems, who was a Boulder citizen, had also been in Aspen for the music program there. And she realized, in fact, she was the one that got the conductor from Aspen to come over and conduct the orchestra that they put together, which we call the Summer Music Festival. So Betty Weems was really the person that put that whole thing together and got it going. And it continues as the Summer Music Festival.
Anything you want to add there, Charlotte, about any of these?
I only got to go to the jazz concert, I think, in my first year, but I thought it was amazing. I really enjoyed listening to the music. It was such a fun part of the first night of CWA.
Yeah, I love the Jazz Festival. I definitely was pleased when those of us who were working with the conference were able to get tickets, because tickets would go so fast. It wasn't an easy thing to make sure that you were a part of on the regular, with any kind of regularity, so it's important.
That just goes to show how important jazz is. I mean, it's the music of America, and we had some wonderful, wonderful jazz musicians that came for that. We got to get it going again.
I really would like to see if I can figure out this question. So if you recognize what I'm about to try to read, you can fill in some words that I can't make sense of. What do you think was the societal... I'm sorry, I can't make sense of this right now. Otherwise, I think this might be a really important question as it relates to the overall society. Does anyone recognize the nature of this question? Okay. What was the... Okay, I'll try that. Let's see if we can make that work. What do you think was the secret sauce for societal savings?
So for CWA during that time, it seemed
48. The conference started in 1948. That's right. My work as a person who is related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I paid a lot of attention about what was going on in the world after WW2. One of the things that happened in Congress right after WW2 was the creation of the Fulbright Scholarship. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Fulbright. I'm a former Fulbright specialist, and so there was a way in which the world was trying to understand, at least in the United States, how do we create better relationships with what's going on around the world, not just here in the United States. So 47 Fulbright came into existence. 48 Howard came up with the Conference on World Affairs. There were a number of really important, and then in 1948, the military in the United States became integrated. So there was a lot that was happening in that period of time of not having anything related to WW2 again. So it was a big impetus. Again, you will learn a lot of that if you have an opportunity to read this book. It's all there. Those faculty members who were a part of what Howard was trying to put together will speak about that because they were directly involved with those kinds of concerns. What had happened after WW2. And since a lot of the individuals who were there in the early days are quoted in this book and can be heard on that 1998 conference when this book was distributed to Marion, Howard's wife, and the two children, if you will. So there was really something going on about not seeing what happened to people who were in concentration camps and what happened on other continents, that we needed to find a way to not have this happen again. Fortunately, we've survived to not have another WW, but we don't know. We don't know. But that's what was going on at that time. That was a part of the thinking of those people who helped Howard in putting this all together. And from the earlier question that was asked about the event yesterday, that's why I think this conference needs to keep going on, because there will be a need for more people talking to each other, not just here in the United States. Absolutely. That's why we have the idea of perspectives on the panels, if you will. Okay, let's see what other questions I can make sense of here. I'd like to share my gratitude and connections. I attended CWA sessions as an undergrad and master's student, 1983 to 1990. Summer of 1987, I lived next to Howard, and my roommates helped out as CWA volunteers. A dear friend, late mother-in-law, Joanne Clark, helped to found CWA in the 1940s as an undergraduate. Thank you. Where is she? Right there, okay. Thank you. Any reactions from the panelists and thoughts?
Yeah, I think even today, coming from a voice who's only part of this for a couple years now, I think it's so important because we see that with our students now too, wanting to still be a part of this and every single year checking in and coming back. And so, yeah, it's definitely still alive and well. And everyone, I think, who is a part of it sees the importance of it and wants to continue coming for years and years.
Okay, here's another question, or rather comment. One thing I miss is the irony, humor, and clever titles for the panels that were fun. Seems like that is missing in the current description. Panel, what do you think?
I guess that's the fault of the people that polish the titles. we sometimes have some wonderful titles, and then they get kind of changed to something a little more ordinary by the committee that approves the various titles. Because we come up with some pretty wild ones sometimes.
Yeah, I would say this is another reason I highly recommend trying to become a part of the planning process in any way you can, because it goes through a lot of work creating the panel titles, and you have to find something that makes sense to the audience, that can be broad enough to kind of encompass everyone. So I think, yeah, sometimes we might lose sight of like some of the funny and comedic bits that we could do, but yeah, it takes a long time to prep every part of a panel.
I'm going to open the floor in just a few minutes for us all to participate in a way that was like done when this book was actually put out. That there was a way for everybody to sort of share, like some of the questions that we've had as our mainstay here about their involvement in CWA, and which panels were exciting to them, and what kinds of things that we would like to think of for the future, and going from there. I will try to recognize people by hands and then go from there. But this is the part that I was hoping that we'd be able to get to, is to now bring the audience into doing what they did for the 50th anniversary for Conference on World Affairs in 1998. We recently, 3 years ago, had the 75th, but now I really am interested in what it is that is about this idea from a generational perspective. That's what John and I were interested in. What is it that was so significant for you that you put CWA on your calendars to be able to attend each year, for those of you who were able to do such, if you will? And so, okay, good. We'll start right now.
I was an undergraduate on campus, late 1950s, early 1960s. One of my favorite professors was Howard Higman. He requested that instead of having a textbook, we subscribe to 3 different periodicals: a conservative piece, a liberal piece by a Stone, and a moderate newsletter. Those were our texts for the entire year. He also admonished all of the students to get out of class, to attend the CWA conferences for the entire week. And other professors joined in. My wife had a couple of professors who said, "What are you guys doing in class? Get out of here. Go to these lectures and learn something." So I've been somewhat connected to CWA since my undergraduate career.
In what year? Sorry? What year?
Beginning in 1959 to 63 and 64.
Ah, good. Some of the early days for the conference.
Molly Ivins
Who's
came a friend of ours through a dinner while she was attending some of the conferences. Don Gruson and I were fraternity brothers here during those years. And we still maintain a close relationship.
Don Gruson and I founded the CU Buffoons, the a cappella group, in 1962.
Thank you for sharing. Others of you? While the rest of you are getting your nerve to speak. Oh, over here, yes. If you wouldn't mind talking about the period when you were here, as well as some of the things that conferences that you attended that you really found quite inviting. So there, if you all didn't hear, we were talking about a period when the conference was referred to as an kind of safari, intellectual safari. And there was also another aspect of the conference that you appreciated. What was that again? Oh, Roger Ebert. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Fantastic. Yes. Yes, during the time that after he had had his surgery. Yes. Okay. There's a gentleman in the back. If you could speak up as loud as you can, I'd appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that aspect about Howard. That's a good one. Any reactions from the panelists about?
I was I lived in Wyoming from 1969 to 1987, but I came down every year to the conference, stayed with a friend. That's how important the conference was to me.
Okay. When you read the book, you will see exactly how that was described. That's described about how Howard would get on the telephone to call people to ask them to be a part of the conference, and that what he needed to do in those minutes that he had with them to convince them, and he had to do some convincing, to come to for no pay, to live, to bunk with people from the city, and to engage for an entire week for the conference. That it's talked about very nicely in this book. I didn't know that I would have the opportunity to tell you so much about this particular book. How many of you knew about this book? How many of you read it? You're going to enjoy this, y'all. This is a treat. This is absolutely a treat, and I strongly encourage you to pay attention to the audio tapings of the conferences over the years as well. Anyone else who wants to share? Yes.
I know we keep coming back to Ebert, but I was in junior high at Casey here in Boulder in 84, 85. So I was about 14, and I was a film buff, came to see Ebert do his film thing. I think he gave a panel once on being alcoholic as a young man, very personal. And afterwards, I was so precocious, I went up to him and said, "I'd like to take you to lunch." And he said, he laughed and said, "How about I take you to lunch?" And he became a lifelong friend after that. And I just think it spoke to the intimacy of the whole conference. That you could be up there talking about world issues and then, like, literally make a friend out of it. It was, I just never seen anything like it.
Mary Kate would like to see you. That's private, y'all. Great. This is something else that I think that's really important about the way that Howard was engaged. He had a number of students who were lifetime colleagues, people with whom he interacted over time. And there's a film that was made by one of those students who actually you can find that should be a part of the library system, that's a part of the Alumni Association, if you all are interested in that. You can find it on the web as well. I don't recall his name, but it is available. And to hear about those relationships that Howard had with some of his students for long, long periods of time. This gentleman who wrote part of this, who edited and printed it, met him in 1949. And that's when that relationship got started and continued up until any other time. There was another hand or another comment? What year was that? 84? In 49. Okay. I don't think Continue was alive then. The gentleman who just spoke about having. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. I would like to sort of begin to, yes, I just got the word, about 10 minutes. I'd like to end this session in thinking about the future for CWA. We have a few minutes left for being able to do that. What is it that you would like to see, knowing what CWA is and what the world is and what the world seems like it's becoming? What would you like CWA to be? Oh, wonderful, lots of hands. I'll go here, here, and then there.
One of the things you mentioned repeatedly is that Higman had the kind of personality, the charisma, to gather in, from the very beginning, some remarkable people to begin this conference, to get it going. Forgive me, but it seems like in the last few years, you're having a harder and harder time to bring in the heavy hitters. People who are speaking out on current, urgent topics of the moment. I think in the past you've had a few of those, but it's with the internet now, with YouTube, with podcasts, if you want to hear anybody, you go immediately to the computer. So I'm wondering, why would any serious thinker on any topic choose to come here now? You got a lot of competition out there. How do you, it seems like you need a little more focus to bring in the kind of people that you need to maintain this kind of conference level that you want.
Thank you so very much. This fits me a lot. I'm always interested in hearing those things that will challenge us. So, thoughts, reactions. I'll be with you in just a bit. Thoughts, reactions. Well, let me get the panelists too.
Yeah, I would have to say, I think, because I've grown up with podcasts, I've grown up with YouTube, my entire life has been social media. And for me personally, you don't get any other type of connection or engagement through social media, through online sources. I know it's convenient, but there isn't, I mean, it's hard to convince people that this is the better way of getting information or forming connections with speakers and people, which is something we're working on, and I completely agree. I think it's important to have heavy hitters, but social media and online sources can't provide the same connection that CWA can, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you, and we just have to have a better marketing system, I think. I mean, there's certainly people that are as famous as Eleanor Roosevelt and Buckminster Fuller out there today that we could get to come here. And that's what we try and do in our various committees is we get excellent people. Maybe they may not be as famous as the ones we used to get, but we still get awfully good people to come.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I'm sure that Jordan and Charlotte can actually talk about that really well.
We definitely. Go ahead, Charlotte, and I'll wait.
We only have 4 minutes left, y'all.
Yeah, I think trying to get, this is something we focused a lot on, is trying to get students in the buildings. And so one thing we started doing was classroom visits. So we actually have speakers go and visit classrooms, and we've seen that the speakers who do go visit, that's where a lot of students will be like, that's somebody I want to hear from and go to in the future. I think going back to podcasts and stuff, when students see that there's an ease of just, oh, I can just go research this person. Sometimes it makes it a little less enticing. But I think that's why the classroom visits have been so impactful, because that's when they get to form a relationship with the speaker and see how they can benefit from coming to these talks. So hopefully as we continue engaging with students in that way, we can get some more kids to come and sit in here.
One of the problems we've had is getting faculty interested interested enough in the conference that they allow their students to miss class and go to the conference. And that really is the one thing, if John was here, he'd agree. We have to get more faculty, more of the professors interested in the importance of the conference.
We only have 2 minutes left. Thank you very much for your responses. The gentleman in the back who had his hand raised. Was that not you? Yeah. Bring back the jazz concert. Okay. We'll see what we can do.
I second that.
You know, because this is being recorded, it's going to be a really useful tool, the things that you all have said and brought up, because I'm going to encourage the rest of the members of the steering committee and the other chairs to pay attention to what has been said in this particular session. I really want to thank the panelists who were able to be here. I'm sorry that there was this confusion about Tom, because I know that he was one of the draws to this particular panel, that we had the miscommunication apparently. And so that was really concerning to me. He's a buddy of mine, and so I really was expecting that he could speak from the perspective of being in the sociology department and the way that he was involved around some of the same issues that Howard was interested in, especially the relationship to poverty and people who were not a part of the mainstream. So that was one of the things that I had hoped that Tom would be able to speak about in terms of his involvement with Howard during his years on the sociology faculty. I thank you all right now. I would hope that we can make this panel something that's going to be a regular for people who don't know about the background of CWA and the ways that we can improve it. I don't know if I'll be available or a part of CWA for next year, but I'm going to push for it to be able to, we can have this panel. So I'm going to ask you all to support me in making sure that we can get this done. Thanks to all of you. Have a great rest of the conference.